Okay, thank you very much, Judy. Good morning, everyone. Slightly after 8 o'clock on a Monday morning, great day to hopefully talk about how we can make Wyoming a better place. So it's good to see everyone. We're not going to go through a roll call or anything. This is the Joint Judiciary Committees meeting today to discuss interim topics for the upcoming interim. Have appreciated very much all of the recommendations that we received. There are numerous items for us to hear from those who would like to testify on them and from the committee. The way that I think we would like to work this committee, your two co-chairmen met, and we'll stick with kind of the process that has been done on many other committees that I've been involved with. I think we'll hear good testimony today. You've got a ranking sheet that we'll send you home with, and that's your homework to kind of decide what you think we ought to prioritize and where we ought to go during the interim. And then we'll ask for you to get that back to us by Thursday. So we'll give you a couple of days to do that. And then the two co-chairmen will sit down and try to prioritize. That all has to go to the management council at that point. We can be given other topics that we may or may not talk about today. The management council may ask us to take something up. They may strip something off of what we recommend to them, but that's kind of how the process works. And really value everyone on the panel here. Everybody's input is important because we've got a lot of things to consider. Think in the back of your mind, timing. We only have a limited amount of time, as you know, and so, Mr. Co-Chairman, any thoughts to get us started this morning?
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chairman. I'm glad everybody's here. There's a lot of interesting topics, and one of the most important is as we evaluate these, how much time will the topic take? And so we really want you to be honest and upfront about what your estimate is on how much time will be necessary for the committee to adequately address the topic that you're bringing to us. With that, let's get rolling, Mr. Co-Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Co-Chairman. Anything committee before we start? Okay, let's jump right in. We've got about 30 items to get underway with, so I would ask anyone who testifies this morning, let's be brief and to the point. And we'll obviously allow questions from the committee. If there's anyone streaming in this morning, we will certainly try to get to that testimony as well, but we'll get to those in the room first. So let's get started with the first proposal. Is Mr. Bennett here? I apologize, I do not know who Mr. Bennett is, but we have a proposed interim topic of a revisit to removing exemption of schools and libraries from obscenity pornography statutes. That goes hand in hand. That's been recommended to us from a couple of folks. Is there anyone who would like to testify on this proposed topic? Is there anyone wanting to testify on that exemption of schools and libraries from obscenity and pornography statutes? Okay. Let's move on to a proposed topic of diversion program for low-level offenders and abuse and neglect cases. And Lisa, I might ask if you would be willing to come forward. Excuse me, I'll be more formal, Ms. Bennett. It's good to see you.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Co-Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Elisa Butler and I am the State Court Administrator for the Wyoming Judicial Branch. Mr. Chairman, this topic really is an investigation into how we can better manage and basically treat folks who come into the court system with behavioral health issues. So that includes mental health issues and substance abuse issues. What we have found is those folks continue to recycle through the system. They are often locked up without much treatment, and this costs the state a whole lot of money and is not a very effective solution. So the investigation or the interim topic would basically include an analysis of potential diversion programs for those folks who come into the judicial system who are eligible for that kind of diversion. Generally, probably misdemeanors and low-level felons who have these mental health and substance abuse issues. So there are other states that are doing this throughout the nation. It's something that we think is worth consideration in the interim.
Ms. Butler, thank you very much. Appreciate you being here this morning. Go ahead, Representative, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So are you, with the district, are you thinking felony, misdemeanor, or both? And what have you looked at as far as others, other states that you said you've seen?
Ms. Butler, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Oakley, so it would likely be, and again, this is all just subject to, I think, this body and the members of the judiciary, but what we've seen in other states is misdemeanors and low-level felons, so people who don't have violent felonies. And one of the, I guess, the model that everybody seems to look to right now is in Miami. They have a very robust diversion program in Miami with a lot of treatment. It's taken them a long time. I think there's a judge there, Judge Leafman is his name, and he's been working on this for 20 years. But it has proved very effective in terms of treating those who have these issues, as well as saving money for the state, for the judicial system.
Go ahead, Mr. Co-Chairman.
Thank you. Ms. Butler, there's not a time estimate listed on your sheet. Can you give us some idea there?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Co-Chairman, I anticipate this would take, it's not an insubstantial lift, probably 1 to 2 hours, I would say, for each meeting.
Committee, anything else? It strikes me, committee, real quickly that this whole mental health piece feels like just about every one of our committees ought to keep that on the radar screen. This certainly does that, and so something to think about. The governor has stated repeatedly throughout the session that he cares pretty deeply about this and that we need to continue to work on it. So, Ms. Butler, any other thoughts on this?
Mr. Chairman, no, unless there are other questions.
Okay, great. And we've got a couple coming up that we'll look forward to your comments on them too. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, you're next up, Ms. Butler, if you want to just stay put, we'll let you maybe assist the good senator to my left on this rural attorney program. Okay, if you have any comments on that.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Co-Chairman, members of the committee, so this topic generally would look at trying to increase attorneys who practice in rural areas. What we're encountering right now is a lot of turnover. So attorneys who practice in those areas are wanting to retire, and there are no attorneys coming in to replace them. There are other states, again, who have looked at providing incentives for new attorneys to go to these rural areas to practice. I think South Dakota is the example that we have, and I think it's a fairly new program, but what they have found is it does seem to work. I know there are other incentive programs throughout the United States for doctors, those kinds of things to, I guess, push people to practice in rural areas. And I think those have proven fairly effective. I think what South Dakota has said they found, and probably not 100% of the time, but once you get somebody invested in a community, in a rural community, you incentivize them to go there for a couple of years, they generally stay because they form relationships, they form a client base, and really that's what we're looking at, that turnover in those rural areas is becoming a major problem. And that's true all the way up. So if you don't have attorneys in those areas, it's very hard to find judges in those areas as well when you have turnover in the judiciary. So this topic really is an effort to try to, or a look at whether or not a program like that would be effective in Wyoming.
Appreciate that, Ms. Butler. Thank you. Senator Cooper, you had a similar suggestion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, this topic was brought to me also by one of my district attorneys or county attorneys, and she's on the, working with the Bar Association. And really, in my neighborhood, it really is a problem. We just don't have enough people to do the work, and they come and go pretty fast. We need to retain them, keep them in the neighborhood if we can. I think it's a very worthwhile project.
Appreciate it, Senator Cooper. Thank you. Let's go to Senator Schuler and back to the representative. Thank you. Representative Chetty.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a question on incentives. Are you looking, some of these other states that you've looked at, do they generally use monetary incentives, or is it maybe forgiving their student loans or something like that? What are some of the incentives that you're seeing?
Ms. Butler?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Schuler, I think in South Dakota, it is a certain amount that the attorneys are paid to help with student loans. So, it is a monetary incentive.
Representative, go ahead.
The good senator took my question. I was curious about the kinds of incentives that are available.
Very good. Mr. Co-Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just same question. How much time do you think this one's going to take?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Co-Chairman, I would guess overall, maybe this would take two hours throughout the interim, depending on how much discussion there is.
So, Ms. Butler, thank you for that. And committee, this is, I would just throw this out in case I forget to remind the right people. Maybe you can help me remind people. We've utilized the WWAMI program for a long time, and everyone's pretty well aware of that. One thing that we're finding, it's come to me from a couple of folks in my neck of the woods, that program maybe is not as effective as it used to be. It's getting very, very competitive out there. A lot of states are just frankly buying our doctors right out from underneath us. So with that in the background, we could certainly draw from our experience on the WWAMI front, what we do to try to get our doctors to come home. But keep that in mind that we may have to step up a little bit to make it work. So, Ms. Butler, thank you. Anything else on the rural attorney program? Okay. Let's go to the proposed topic to take another look at House Bill 272. Would appreciate, Mr. Co-Chairman, any of your crew, maybe someone could weigh in on House Bill 272.
Representative Oakley, maybe?
Senators, I don't believe this had made it to the floor over on our side. So is there anyone here today? Oh, please come forward. Yeah, absolutely. This has that good Senator Ellis as a contact person, but we've got someone else here with us. So, good morning.
Good morning. My name is Kara Chambers. I'm with the Wyoming Attorney General's Office, Division of Victim Services. This was actually the second attempt to bring this bill. This was recommended by the Human Trafficking Task Force, which is part of the Attorney General's Office, which I chair. Pretty self-explanatory, eliminating a loophole by just extending a definition that already exists in the law to apply to sexual contact, to close a practice that occurs in some of the massage parlors in our state.
Thank you. That's it.
You're welcome.
That's all.
Thank you.
I mean, thank you so much for being here. Any questions, committee? I think everyone's got it. Thank you so much. Appreciate the enlightenment. All right, let's move on to, oh, Mr. Co-Chairman, go ahead.
Thank you. I think this topic also ties in with human trafficking. And I think that's another worthy topic that we should not let slip off of our radar screen.
I agree, Mr. Co-Chairman. There's opportunity for us to obviously loop some of these issues together. We have visited with Brian a little bit on that, and I think as we go forward, we might be able to combine some things. But let's move into protection orders. This has been an area of interest for yours truly, but also we had a handful of bills that kind of touch in this area, committee. And I thought it was important that we bring this for consideration. I think what we might do is ask if, I'm looking for Tara Mira. There she is. She's on the right-hand side. Come on up, Ms. Mira. Thank you for being here. You and I have visited about this. We've got a bill from a couple years ago that Representative Stith on the other side has recommended that we take it up again. We got it that far over on the House side, and it fell on hard times. But anyway, take it away, Ms. Mira. There's 2 or 3 things that have come up this session.
Thank you, Chairman Lambden, committee members. Good morning, good Monday morning with the wind blowing across the hills. Protection orders. We just had the issues of human trafficking brought up as well. There's a lot of intersection with families and how people get vulnerable to get pulled into human trafficking. A lot of our families need a lot of protection out there. I know there's myths that protection orders in particular are just a tool used before you start your divorce. And I work with the Wyoming Coalition Against Domestic Violence and Sexual Assault advocates across the state. In our positions here at the legislature, we're often on the outside looking into these really messy, hard family situations. And advocates work in our programs across the state who try and keep victims and their children in particular safe. So protection orders were created to keep those folks safe. They're not just a tool before a divorce. They should be solid, enforceable orders to protect people. What had happened a couple years back that gave rise to this bill a couple years back was in one county in the Southwest, there was a ruling by the court that these don't have to be enforceable orders. It's Monday morning, I can't remember all the specifics, but keeping it easy, that if someone stipulates to the order, technically it can't be enforced, particularly the gun provisions that the federal law applies to. You can't possess a firearm if you're going to be subject to a protection order because you've scared someone so bad, you need protection. So that bill, and I'm trying to remember the actual bill number now that it's Monday morning, Senate File 75 a couple years ago. We tried to fix it. It got really complicated, I think, in one chamber. It had passed one side, but on the other side got really complicated. From our perspective, protect people. These are judicial court orders. They should carry the same weight any other order does. Stipulated or not, they should be enforceable.
Thank you, Ms. Muir. I appreciate that. Any questions on this topic? Anything, committee? Ms. Muir, while we've got you here, would you be willing to touch on a couple of other things that everyone will find in their packets? One being a strangulation piece that came to me during the interim this past year, actually from the northeast part of the state. One of our representatives who works in the family violence area, and apparently, at least in my view, there's some holes in that language. We brought the bill. It was not something the leadership on the Senate side wanted to allow out into circulation, and so I asked that the committee consider it, this morning. But anyway, Ms. Beer, that's one, and there's maybe a couple other thoughts on the domestic violence front.
Thank you, Chairman Landon. There was a strangulation bill, Senate File 183. It had a couple of things that needed to be changed. One, a pretty heavy lift, which is probably why it didn't go anywhere. But then just a couple of words needing changed. We heard from a law enforcement officer who unfortunately has since moved to Texas, but he's gotten a lot of specialized education around strangulation. And strangulation is really common in domestic violence cases, unfortunately. And it's a little counterintuitive how much damage and how much fear can be happening when someone just simply places their hands around your neck. So there's a couple of words. We had an old word of blocking. We wanted to change it to covering. It should be covering the nose, mouth, or both. And this particular officer felt that there were some other prosecutors who were also struggling with that language and being able to charge cases appropriately. So super easy fix, but the expert on strangulation wanted to also try and take away causing or attempting to cause bodily injury when you're doing that strangulation, which again is kind of an education piece about just how dangerous strangulation can be, and you may not see any injuries at all right away.
Thank you for that. Committee, any questions? Go ahead, Mr. Co-Chairman.
My favorite question, Ms. Muir, how long do you think you will need on this topic?
I'm hoping as we look at some of the intersection of a couple of these issues, if we take some of them up, hopefully 1, maybe 2 hours at the beginning, and then depending on what we want to act on, 1 or 2 hours each meeting. It's a big lift. I don't think we've really focused in on this for a number of years. But it'd be a heavy lift. We'd also like to weigh in on the diversion piece with behavioral health, and if there's violence against a family member and what kinds of things can happen there too.
Sure. Ms. Muir, any other thoughts on the domestic violence front in particular? These two issues that we just talked about really fall kind of generally into that area. And my thought, committee, is that if we desired, we could, put a couple of these items together, take them up, get a look at them. Anything else that you want to add to this front?
Thank you, Chairman. Just a couple things, because I think in your list, there's another item on parental rights and family law, which probably also ties in with Representative Rodriguez-Williams' abduction of children, particularly when there's a family law case going on. I think there's a lot of intersections there with the protection orders, because safety should be first with the children. And how does our state help see and create a structure so the children stay safe from being abducted or from future violence? And I think there's another piece, hopefully in your packet, around guns, firearms again. Depending on what happens today, tomorrow, there is a bill floating around on one chamber. This is a very serious topic, and it's about keeping people safe. Wyoming is now number 3 in the country for when men kill women in intimate partner relationships. Access to a firearm makes her 5 times more likely to end up dead. So that sounds extreme, but that is what happens. And part of that is this whole safety piece. So those extra things we'd like to have some conversation about as well.
Thank you, Ms. Muir. Any questions? Representative Rodriguez-Williams, you've got one coming up, and maybe save your comments for that point. Any thoughts you have at this, like right now, or do you want to just save it for that topic?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I'll go ahead and wait.
Yeah, okay. But I agree. I think there's some intersections here and there, so keep that in mind. Thank you, Ms. Muir. Oh, go ahead, Representative Oakley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I just, I guess I'm looking for directions from you. I do have some comments to make, but I also can wait. Which would you, should I make comments about this topic?
Absolutely. I think
Okay.
you're welcome to do that now as we go through.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I guess one of my things, and I, with all due respect, and I want to be, but I do want to just give my opinion. Some of these things, protection orders, parental rights, we're looking at time number 3 that this committee has looked at them, and it's expensive, and we need to give everybody some time. So I'm kind of at some point with some of these, they can be brought as personal bills, but just for me to point that out, I know we've got some new people on the committee as well, and we can discuss it. But some of these we've done before, and I personally would like us to give the time and opportunity to maybe somebody we haven't seen before, or a topic we haven't seen before more appropriately.
Okay, thank you, Representative. Anything else? Okay, let's keep moving. Next up for our consideration, this is one that I agreed to allow into the list for discussion, and that's the sex offender registry piece. If absolutely, please come forward.
Thank you, Senator Kara Chambers. This was not the one we submitted, but it does dovetail nicely with what's on page 24, which is what my office did submit. So yes, just a broad discussion based on a bill that was in front of your committee where we all decided it would probably be best to address at the interim. It's a broad topic. There's a couple different issues with the sex offender registry. The one on page 24 that the Attorney General's office brought forth was really more of the structural loopholes. There are some crimes that aren't necessarily encompassed. We discussed in committee about, crimes in other states that might be called something else, but fit into our definition to make sure that they're covered. So I believe merging the two is probably appropriate to look at just sort of all the different aspects of the sex offender registry, what it entails, who gets encompassed, what's an appropriate time to allow someone to readdress their need to register. I think that was what the bill that you saw, which the number's escaping me, but.
No, I appreciate that. Committee, page 24 was referenced as a much more in-depth consideration for us, but certainly fits into to this. Any questions or thoughts on this topic? Okay, thank you. Oh, Mr. Co-Chairman.
How much time?
For us, we didn't think it would be too 1 to 2 hours for one meeting. I think it just, I'm assuming that the first meeting would be sort of a broad discussion that might bleed into, a couple hours just to present everything. I would be bringing an assistant attorney general from the law office in the criminal division who really monitors this. We might also have folks from DCI who administer the sex offender registry, just to answer questions. But then I believe from there, whatever direction you all decide, I don't think it would take all 3 meetings.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. Okay. If there's nothing else, committee will keep moving.
Make sure that there's nobody on Zoom on any of these topics.
Judy, I'm looking over your direction. If somebody has a hand up, can you let us know? And I apologize if I overlooked anyone streaming out there. I kind of indicated we would take testimony at the end from those not in the room. So, but if there's somebody who specifically wants to get a hand up in any one of these, I'd sure consider it. Okay, thank you. Parental rights in family law. This I threw into the Hopper committee because of the Beitman bill, which came in front of the Senate Judiciary Committee. Really, I don't know if everyone had a chance to even look at that bill, but it was a bill that considered getting rid of the grandfather statute, the grandparent statute. It wasn't grandfathered in, it was the grandparent statute. So that was a good discussion, but the bill, did not make it any further. It was enough of a discussion, though, that I thought we ought to put it on the list. So, okay, any questions on this one? Is there anyone who wants to testify on that particular issue, the parental rights piece, the grandparent right piece? Okay. Okay, and the next one, federal firearm prohibition. Is there anyone that wants to testify on federal firearm prohibitions? I allowed this one in the Hopper 2 committee just simply because it is an issue that a lot of folks care about. Education on federal firearm prohibitions and how they intersect with what we do here. My only caution here is that if you take up one like this, it's a time consumer. Okay. Anything else on that one? Okay. let's go to the enhanced security piece for the courts and the judiciary. And Ms. Butler, if you wouldn't mind coming up and providing any thoughts on that one for us.
Mr. Chairman, Elisa Butler, Administrative Office of the Courts for the Wyoming Judicial Branch. So this interim topic really is to look at the statutes and the legislation surrounding the security for judges in the courts throughout the state. What we have seen, and it seems to be trending upward nationwide, and Wyoming is no exception, is that there are increased threats, increased violence against judges and courts throughout the nation. And, you know, there was just recently some federal legislation that was passed that allowed for judges to remove information from public websites and those kinds of things to ensure that people don't know where they live. Wyoming is hard because we're so small. Most people know where judges live. Not in every community, but in many. But this is just something for you all to, or our request is for you all to take a look at and see if there are additional things that we could do to help protect the courts and the judges who provide a very valuable public service for the people of the state of Wyoming.
Appreciate that. Comments, questions, Mr. Co-Chairman?
I want to ask Representative Nemec if he'd like to chime in a little bit on, he's got some expertise in this area. I'd like to hear a few words.
Representative Nemec, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
I think it would be a great topic to bring up through the interim. A lot of the courts in the state vary on their security issues. You know, I'm happy to be from one that has very enhanced security, but I've heard from other judges that have been visiting, and it's a range. So I think it'd be a great topic to bring up.
Thank you, Representative. Appreciate that. Any other questions or thoughts on this one? Okay, very worthy consideration for us there. Let's go to the next one. We skip over the rural practice piece because Senator Cooper has already weighed in earlier on that one. The burglary piece, Senator Case, do you want to offer a couple of thoughts on that one?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I had worked on this a while ago. Right now, under Wyoming law, there are 2 levels of punishment for burglary. The first is the normal burglary is a felony punishable by imprisonment for not more than 10 years, a fine of not more than $10,000 or both. So it's a 10-year felony. There's aggravated burglary, Mr. Chairman, which is can be a 25-year felony. And aggravated burglary also always comes about in things like there's a firearm involved, or, you know. But as burglary has been discussed in the courts, it's been tied to what's called an occupied structure. And it goes back into medieval times. There was a thing called housebreaking, where, I mean, you had these evil people that came in your house when your family was sleeping, and it was a very dangerous, dangerous crime. The way it works right now, literally, if you're walking in a parking lot and there's a car there and they have left a wallet on the dash and the window's open and you reach in and you grab that wallet, technically you could be this 10-year felony. Now, all the prosecutors, I can see their ears going way up tall, and we never do that. That would be.
There's one right beside.
I know, I've already shared it with her. And that they would never do that. There's a whole broad range of theft statutes. It doesn't, but it technically meets the definition of burglary as the courts have worked it through. Another example, you know, you go into someone's shed in their backyard. The courts have ruled that's an occupied structure because it's potentially occupiable. There could be somebody in there, but you know there's nobody in there, and you open the door and you take the lawnmower. It's a junker. It's worth a couple $100, and that is potentially a 10-year felony for burglary. So this was brought to me by a practitioner. You know, it's not that, and I know the prosecutors, they all say, well, we would never do that, but it makes no sense. But there is no protection here for the situations where they didn't break into a structure. There was no way that there was any people in that structure, and the theft itself was minor. So that's what this is about. And I did share a copy of the engrossed bill that passed the Senate a few years back. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. Go ahead, Representative Oakley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't think that this is the fix that Senator Case thinks it is, because all of the situations he just described are then misdemeanor theft, which already exists in our statute. We can create a misdemeanor burglary. It just creates a, kind of duplicative, but without getting into the weeds, I mean, I always like parsing criminal law statutes, so I don't mind personally taking it and kind of, I don't think it's something that would be a heavy lift or we need to spend a lot of time on. We either make the decision we're going to create another misdemeanor or not, but I personally don't mind the discussion. So around that, a misdemeanor burglary.
Well, there you have it. The Fremont County folks have come together on this one, and so anyway, is there any other thoughts on this piece or any questions?
Mr. Chairman, and
Go ahead, Senator.
I see a few black helicopters myself once in a while. I do.
Yeah, you do.
You know. But it does remove the opportunity to really hold a hammer on an offendant with the felony level if these elements exist in the crime. And she's muttering next to me, but she doesn't have a microphone. And so I hope we will discuss it. I hope you guys would help me.
All right, thank you.
I think it'd be a very straightforward topic. It could, an hour.
Thank you,
less.
Senator. Appreciate that. That was going to be the next question from the co-chairman. So is there anyone who would like to testify on this one? Okay, let's keep moving, folks. Senator Case, you just keep the microphone because the next proposed interim topic, you're listed as a contact person on women and the legal system.
Oh my gosh, just a little bit bigger. This
Walk us
came from
through
a
this one.
practitioner in my county, and he has 4 pieces of this, but he does domestic relations, and he is, over and over, he says that women get hammered in these proceedings. And so he's got ideas in domestic violence, in the stalking statute, in common law marriage, and I can't remember what the 4th one was. So Wyoming doesn't really recognize common law marriage. And it causes huge problems for women, that have been with someone for a long time, and they get the short end of the stick. Child support. So there are 4 different major women's issues here, and I hope you read them. I know that I need to take the committee's time to do that, or maybe I should. Oh, I'm sorry, it's page 7. It's the big, long one in here. And frankly, this is what a practitioner wrote, and he's got an example in each one of these of where women clients get the short end of the stick in the system, over and over.
Senator, thank you. It was good reading, and there is a lot of pertinent information there. The challenge might be, committee, as we look at these and prioritize them over the next 2 or 3 days, time, just time. It's estimated 6 hours. It felt like it might even be more than that. But Senator, back to you on that front.
Mr. Chairman, yeah, it might pay the committee to do this in a 2-step process. Just hear about the problems with this, and then kind of an open to say an hour, hear about these problems, maybe 2 hours. And then just stop and say, is there any one of these that we want to work on, rather than trying to work on all 4? But to have our ear to the ground about these issues, and if it's true all across Wyoming, I mean, if these are really important situations where women are disadvantaged in these situations.
appreciate you bringing this, and Senator Case, this does touch on a couple of the topics that have already been brought up this morning. Looking over at Ms. Muir, and it sure really does intersect 2 or 3 spots there. So keep that in mind, committee, as you consider. Go ahead, Representative Provenza.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will say that there's some academic research on these types of topics and what the sentencing disparities are, particularly I think based on gender in terms of what crimes. So I think that there's potentially solutions that are already been vetted, looked at, and certainly the problem I think has been identified in multiple ways. So it might not be as much of like a deep dig into all anecdotal or whatever stories, but we can look to science to help us answer some of these questions.
Appreciate that. Anything else, committee? Okay, let's keep moving. We've got a long ways to go. Let's come to crimes of obscenity, House Bill 87. This was in part brought by Senator Steinmetz, but I think it appears in another spot or two in our packet. Would anybody like to testify on the need to take up this proposed interim topic on crimes of obscenity revisions? Educational exception. Go ahead, Representative Washit.
Thank you, Senators. You know, this was a topic of hot concern in our community. I think our school board found a way to address it. I'm not sure if removing the exceptions in the statutes is the laser beam solution that we might want to take, but it is a disconcerting idea that some of this material is in our libraries and or has been. So my big concern here is you know, from watching the coverage of our school board meetings there in Casper is again, it's one of those very volatile topics that will generate lots of testimony and it would be a time-consuming topic if the committee decides to hear it.
Anything else, committee, on this one? Consider it as you will the next couple of days, and I think the co-chairman's right. The caution is just how much time we can really spend on that particular issue. Unconstitutional federal overreach is the next proposed interim topic for us. Representative Pendergraft? Is there anyone who would like to speak on this one? Is there anyone out in the room that would like to speak on this one? Did the representative visit with any of his associates over on the House side? Mr. Co-Chairman.
I did have a chance to visit briefly with Representative Pendergraft, and you know, he originally had a bill before us this session, which was much broader, looking at all sorts of federal overreach. This one is more focused just on the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms and Explosives federal overreach area. And his projection is to create some type of multi-state nullification effort to resist the federal overreach. So not so much a statutory change on our end, but more of a seeking out of willing partners in other states to try and cooperate and push back.
So thank you, Mr. Co-Chairman. You know, this is a topic that we can certainly consider in our prioritization, you guys, but we've got a couple of associations, the Council of State Governments West, for example, the NCSL, which is a nationwide organization, and that might be a great opportunity to try to get something like this going. That's actually one of the good things that those organizations do is to kind of bring states together on issues. But anything else on this proposed topic? Okay, let's keep moving. Proposed topic from Mr. Trujillo on prohibiting the release of mugshots and arrests unless convicted. Does anybody want to speak to this one? Go ahead, Mr. Co-Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We had a similar bill last year in House Judiciary. It didn't survive. There were a couple of issues raised here. One was just the impact of somebody's photograph showing up in a web posting or a news release before they've been convicted of anything. And especially the mugshot when somebody might not look their best in that image, that it can be disconcerting to the individual who shows up on the news. And so the thought was, those individuals are innocent till proved guilty, and maybe we shouldn't characterize them through the release of a mugshot. There was much discussion on that bill about, was it really the mugshot or just the embarrassment of being arrested? There was an individual in Sweetwater County who'd been arrested, kind of a prominent business person, and his mugshot was released. There was a local radio station website down there that was grabbing all those mugshots and putting them in publication. And so at the end of the day, it seemed like most of the testimony wasn't so much about it being a mugshot release, but the pretrial publicity more generally. We didn't really get much testimony about the mugshot itself. Most of it was about the pretrial publicity.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Co-Chairman. Any other thoughts on this one? Go ahead, Representative Oakley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and briefly, because everybody heard my opinion last time, but I would be in the same place, which is these topics that we've done before. I personally think, look at the number of people of us here, that if they've been vetted, somebody can bring them as a personal bill, but I think we need to put our time and our efforts on new issues, whatever they may be. Those are my thoughts.
Okay. Anything else? Let's keep moving. The next one, Mr. Co-Chairman, did you have any conversations on this next one with the bringer of the proposed topic of female genital and body mutilization?
No, Mr. Co-Chairman, I've not had any conversations on this one.
Anyone who was approached on this? Oh, please, absolutely, come forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. To be clear, I was not approached, but I was heavily involved in the 2019 bill. So this is already a crime on the books in Wyoming. The portion that I believe Representative Trujillo wants to put back in was specifically removed because it wasn't appropriate. It's already a crime to transport a child anywhere. It's just not under it wouldn't, it could be kidnapping, it could be, a federal crime. So I just think it's just some education. I haven't had an opportunity to speak with her. I wasn't approached, but Senator Dan Larson, brought this back in 2019, and he would be a good source. And I'm trying to think of how many of you were on, maybe not, I mean, except for Chairman Washington, you remember. And so I don't know. I just wanted to provide that information.
No, I really, thank you for that. Some of us are new to the Judiciary Committee, so it's very helpful to have a little perspective. Appreciate Representative Oakley reminding that some of these have been taken up as we go along, and kind of feels like the Education Committee that I was on for about 10 years. Things just come back around the corner again. And well, if you have an idea that you want to, you could certainly reach out to Senator Larson. No one has approached me on this one. Representative Oakley, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think what I'm hearing is that you don't think, in your opinion, this isn't a lift. This isn't something we need to revisit, that the law's okay as is. I know that's tough for you weigh in.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Chairman, Representative, I suppose, yes. We addressed this. This was intentionally removed because it was not appropriate. When this House bill was originally brought, it was trying to put this all under human trafficking, and I had to clarify that this is a separate crime. It is now a separate crime in Wyoming. It is part of my office's responsibility to provide education and training on this, and we do so. But yes, I guess I will go out on a limb and say, no, I don't believe this needs to be addressed because we already did. And it was the will of the body to remove that because it wasn't
Okay,
appropriate.
thank you for that. Appreciate it. Let's keep moving. Representative Chesnick, you're next up. Take it away on this next proposed topic, medical cannabis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This one was brought to me by Normal. They have obviously been working on normalization of marijuana laws, but the big issue now is in the medical marijuana area, where many states now do permit medical marijuana. It is no longer a crime in many states. It is still a crime here in Wyoming. And one of the issues that they brought to my attention was the practice of potentially somebody with a legal prescription and legal use from another state are visiting the state here and come in with their marijuana and find that it's illegal, and they can get arrested for it. And there's a full faith and credit question there that I think is interesting. But basically, the idea is to try and modernize the laws of Wyoming around medical use of marijuana. And that's pretty much all I have to say about it.
Committee, anything on this front? I stand back, this could take your entire interim if you're not careful. Go ahead, Representative Oakley. Because, yeah, you never know. You just kind of get to where you don't want to do any more work there after a while. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Representative.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So again, this is something we did here in this committee in 2021. And just to share, I had a lot to learn because I thought, well, in the liberty interest, this is something we could do. We could legalize it. And then the medical society came to us and said, please don't legalize it because we cannot legally prescribe marijuana because it's still a Schedule I prohibited federal drug. So I guess just for me, where I came to was the feds have to change it because that's the testimony we received. So in a nutshell, and I think you're right, we could end up listening to a lot of testimony about this. So that's just my perspective on it. We did do both a medical and a full legalization bill in front of this committee in 2021.
Thank you, Representative. Appreciate that. I do think I was fortunate to sit in on the sheriffs and chiefs of police, and Byron, if you'd like to come forward on this one, we'd love to hear your perspective. But wonderful night that we got an opportunity to hear from a speaker from down south, and some of you may have been there that night. I can't remember who was able to attend, but it was a lot of information about the legalization just south of here, and I did find myself wondering if there's anything that we need to be considering on this committee and other places when the border's that close, when we've got a lot of this product flowing in and out and across and through. And bail me out, Mr. Odekoven.
Thank you, I think, Mr. Chairman. Byron Odekoven, the Executive Director of the Wyoming Association of Sheriffs and Chiefs of Police. Echoing the sentiment of the good Representative Oakley, and that we spent a lot of time discussing this issue. And I think the discussion this morning helps reinforce some of the misinformation, if you will, out there. The actual phrase medical marijuana is a legal term. Since we met last in 21, I believe, if I got my chronology correctly, the third legal FDA-approved marijuana product is available that can be prescribed. What we're talking about in terms of the reciprocity is somehow a quasi-representation of recognizing an illegal product against federal law in Wyoming in some manner which puts us in law enforcement, as we heard from the medical society and reinforced from the law enforcement perspective, in quite a quandary. So which law do we enforce? Which law do we look the other way for? And how many other laws would you like us to look away from? It creates an interesting cross conundrum for our oath of office, and how that may impact some of the decisions from officers. And the third piece that was rather interesting, and I had not actually considered it in a large scale till we did the 21 discussion, and that relates to firearms. If you swear you are under the use of a cannabis, you are prohibited from signing no on your federal firearms acquisition form. So we would make Wyoming the most friendly Wyoming or firearms related state, asking people to say no when they've already sworn that they have a medical marijuana problem, i.e. the card, for the purchase of a firearm. So that it will be interesting to see what state the feds decide to challenge this process under at some point. And I would hate to see Wyoming be the smallest state in the union, the most firearms-friendly state, all of a sudden becoming that state to which they choose to challenge that issue on the purchase of firearms. So there's a host of issues that go with recognition of an illegal product in Wyoming, rather than focus the attention and the pressure federally for additional research on the beneficial use of those legal products that the FDA has approved and how that research may need to be extended in other areas. So I would resist, Mr. Chairman, or be willing to spend a lot of time testifying, your choice.
Thank you, Mr. Odekoven. Appreciate it. Anything else from Mr. Odekoven? Is there anyone else who wants to testify or say anything on this proposed topic before we go back to the representative for any final thoughts? Representative?
Nothing further really to say, other than I do think this is a problem area. I recognize there's a lot of federalism issues here and a lot of which I think, and again, I'm new to the committee, so I wasn't on the committee before when this topic may have come up. But it's an issue that's not going away, and I do think a study would be still useful.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's move on to the next proposed topic. Representative, you brought us Board of Equalization questions before the board. Walk us through that one.
Okay, this is a fairly simple one that actually could possibly be handled as an individual topic, but it's also perhaps worth a little bit of study, and I think it's an hour at most. It's not going to be a very long topic. This relates to a bill that came, it was passed unanimously in the Senate, 31-0, and it came to our House, and we had kind of a fun little debate. All the lawyers got to the mic and started arguing with each other about what the proper role of the Board of Tax Equalization might be, and what kind of evidence should it be allowed to hear. And it was then defeated in the committee of the whole by a vote of 19-43. I was on the losing side of that. I thought we should have passed the bill on to second reading and considered it. But I think there was a basic disagreement among all the lawyers in the room about what's the purpose of the Board of Tax Equalization. Is it an adjudicative body to decide cases, or is it more of a policy-making body to equalize taxes? And therefore, the kind of evidence that you need to fulfill either of those roles is different. That was that debate. I think we ought to resolve that, in a study committee and try and bring it back, because what's happening is the Board of Tax Equalization is now subject to a Wyoming Supreme Court decision that changed the way it heard evidence and the things it was doing. And it has limited the amount of evidence it can take into consideration. And that's hampering, I think, the efforts of the Board of Tax Equalization to equalize taxes across counties and across different properties. So I think it's worthy of an interim topic. I don't think it's going to be a very long topic. An hour or so of talking to the board itself and other practitioners, I think, would be all we would need.
So Thank you, Representative. I'm looking down at the chairman of our Corporations Committee. Senator Case, any thoughts on this one?
Mr. Chairman, I support this bill. It was a product of your joint interim revenue committee work. Of course, I'm no longer on that committee, and that committee is way different than it was back then. I doubt that they would take it up. But the issue is the State Board of Equalization it's a policy orientated tax policy and adjudication arm. And they traditionally had, said, well, the right answer is kind of in the middle between you guys. They can't do that anymore. The Supreme Court case said that they just have to stay within the bounds of they can't bring in other aspects of a policy nature. And I just think that's wrong. That's not that causes things to needlessly not be settled and policy not to be established. And they're a great board, by the way. They are. At one time, we had a lot of problems with backlogs and things, but this is a really good board, solid, headed up by one of our colleagues from the Senate, former colleagues.
Yeah, thank you for that, Senator. That's exactly right. We have good people on that board who are willing to do that work, which that takes a special person to step up to do that work anyway. The only question that I would have, Representative, thank you for bringing this consideration up. I'm not sure where Management Council would put this. It kind of rests in three different committees. Revenue and Corporations and here. So that doesn't diminish the fact that it was a 31-0 vote on one side and a lot of good debate on the other side. Representative Oakley, and then we'll come back to the co-chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to see it in Judiciary if we're going to hear it, because there's some, I think, misunderstanding, and not in a bad way, but about legal processes, which is exactly why it went down on our side. And we're talking anyway. I think it would be proper in this body, in this committee.
Thank you, Representative Craigo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was going to say the exact same thing, that three of the people that had strong opinions about the bill are on this joint committee. We understand the legal process, and I think that was part of the problem that I had with the bill. It was sort of a one-size-fit-all approach, and I think there's some middle ground where we can, and one of the things we talked about is there's appeals not only from our Department of Revenue, but then there's appeals from the county boards, and those are handled a little bit differently, and there's some nuance in there. And I just thought, I along with Representative Chestik, thought this would be a good committee, because we all understand it. He's practiced in that particular arena before. I have practiced in that arena before. And so we just thought we maybe could get into that nuance a little bit more and actually get the bill to make us all feel comfortable, because I think it's a good topic and it's worthy of discussion. Thank you.
Appreciate that. Thank you, Representative. This is, let's face it, the property tax issue has been probably one of the top three down here in this session. And so I think it's very appropriate. Appreciate that being brought as a consideration. So keep that in mind as you make your list this week. Public defender funding, Representative Craigo, right back to you on that one.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this was actually, and I had put it on when I submitted it, it's related to House Bill 231. And I think there's a broader topic here we could actually look at. I think there might be some other public defender stuff that maybe someone else wants to talk about, but this was literally a one word, actually the strike of one word out of our current statute. And what it was intending to do was allow our public defender to go after federal grant funding. And we talked about it in committee on the House side. It didn't make it much further than that, but what it would do is allow them to go after federal grant funding. The way the statute's written right now, and we could look at that too. We could rearrange how the statute's written. I know there was concern about us signing up for long-term federal funding, and that's not what we were necessarily trying to do. We were trying to allow our public defender to go after some one-time funds to help with mental health and help some of their clients with mental health issues. But the way the statute's written now, the state and the counties would have to match all that. And we were just trying to get away from that. And so that's why I threw this in here. It's actually time-wise would be a very, I think, short and simple discussion. And so I thought it might be kind of a fun one to actually get on our list and one that shouldn't be too controversial.
Representative Provenza, did you have something? Then we'll come back to Representative Oakley. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, and in addition to this conversation, we also heard on the House side, bill that I sponsored with Senator Barlow on court-appointed attorneys' fees for minors. So right now, in the state of Wyoming, we can charge juveniles and their families to pay for a public defender. And so that it's a complicated, I think, conversation to have in terms of what the potential revenue stream is that comes in from that, what the benefits are, if there are any, and if it's a practice we should continue. So I would maybe urge the committee to kind of consider some of that in that, under that funding model, if we're curious about it at all.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Oakley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So especially since the good representative, Representative Craigo said this wouldn't take much time, so I think we can expand the the scope. Anyway, what I'd like to do is also then, if we're gonna look at public defender funding, also look at county attorney funding, and the public defender funding continues to grow, and there's a growing disparity between what the state pays public defenders and what your average county attorney is making. So if we're looking at that, perhaps we could expand the topic a bit.
So committee, add underneath there, what's good for the goose should be good for the gander. Appreciate that. Senator Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just like to mention, anytime Representative Craigo says this is a real simple topic, it won't take long, I get really nervous.
Representative rebuttal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this particular bill, House Bill 231, did not look at the funding or salary levels for the public defenders or any of the lawyers in that office. It was outside the scope of that. I have no problem if we want to do a more holistic review of what we're paying our attorneys in the justice system. That doesn't bother me. I would be supportive of that as well. But this was really just more about the mental health aspect, and there's some grants out there we could get at without us costing the state or the counties any money.
Thanks for getting us back up on the highway there, Representative. Appreciate it. But we're going to come back to co-chairman in just a minute, but I'm going to go to Representative Provenza first.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My recollection is that we talked about, maybe it was only the county attorney salary. Was it the interim before last? And I think did we pass that legislation or did it get hung up? But I know we talked about that. I don't know if we did talk about the pay salary for public defenders. It seems like we did have that conversation.
Thank you for that. Mr. Co-Chairman, thanks for your patience.
Just to bring us home, I think that the bill that Representative Craigo was talking about was in fact fairly tight, pretty small. Maybe some misunderstandings about it that led to its early demise. But I think this is something we could take up, and there are federal grants out there. It's a policy question whether or not you want to accept more federal grants, but I think it's a worthy discussion topic.
Thank you very much, Mr. Co-Chairman. Let's keep moving. Committee, I would remind, we've got about a half an hour, 35 minutes. We're going to have to chug along here. So let's pick up the pace and go to proposed topic of removal of the trespasser, Representative Craigo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This one will not be short and sweet. But so this was House Bill 126. And again, I had put it in when I submitted the topic. This was actually a constituent bill. And once we got it out of committee, we heard lots of concern that it would apply to hunting trespass, which was never the intent. And so, and I'm happy to bring it back as an individual bill as well, but it's kind of a fun topic to talk about, actually. It's interesting. And so I thought it might be something we could learn something about, see what other states have done. And what I would like us to do is focus more in on the businesses, churches, schools aspect of the bill, which I think actually is a good thing, that we talk about that and that people understand what their rights are and what they can or cannot do if they're having an issue in their business, church, school. I'm not worried about hunting trespass. That was never the intent of the bill, and we could specifically exclude that from our discussion or have it part of the discussion, but doesn't need to be part of the result of the legislation. And so I just thought it would be kind of something we could talk about, but it will take some time. There will be debate on that one. We would need some education from our good lawyers on what other states do and kind of how that looks and how it would interplay with our current trespass statutes. So that's all I have on that, Mr. Chairman.
Kind of interesting, Representative, on our side of things, that hunting piece really didn't come up very prominently, but appreciate you bringing it back for consideration. Anything, committee? Okay, let's keep moving. Enhanced penalties for the selling of drugs when it causes death. Where does that bill stand, committee? Can anybody help me with that? Representative Oakley?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Last I looked, it was first up on our general file for today. And I don't know what moving is going to be done, but at this point, 181 is still alive.
I believe, maybe I'm mistaking that, but I think that's what this references, does it not? Okay, thank you.
Yes, and
Representative
hopefully we're going to
Rodriguez
get
is
that through.
Shaking her head yes too. So, okay, let's keep moving. Requirement to report the death of an individual. I don't know, Mr. Co-Chairman, have you spoken with the representative? Is Representative Craigo?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So Representative Walters did talk to me about this and said he was going to submit it under my name. I actually didn't do any research on this, so I don't know the background other than think he had an issue with a constituent in his district and thought we should at least look at this. And if I don't disagree if that is the case, but I can't speak to whether it is or is not.
Kind of rises to a level of consideration for me. I mean, I didn't know that, and I'm looking at Brian thinking, we ought to find out about this maybe. Okay, anything else on this committee? Representative Oakley?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There's a possibility here if the committee would want to, I think there's some other reviews of coroner statutes that would be in order. And so if we did something like that, I think perhaps, I mean, obviously up to the chairman, but that broaden it a little bit and look at those coroner statutes. I think that's certainly something that needs done.
I don't think we have been around those statutes for a while, but go ahead, Senator Case.
Mr. Chairman, I think the last rewrite of the coroner statute came out of corporations, actually quite a few years ago, and it had to do with defining what was a coroner's case, and it had to do with a former representative from your neck of the woods, Mr. Chairman, that really took issue with the coroners taking possession of a body that died of natural causes in a nursing home that was her relative. And so we defined what a coroner's case was. I do know that in I hear concerns from the press that it's very difficult to get information about death. That it's in my county, it's pretty hard. It's pretty hard if it's involves a reservation, and there's a right to know, open meetings, transparency piece of this too. And I'd like to hear the coroner's side of this, but I'm not opposed to going into this set of statutes.
Mr. Co-Chairman.
I also submitted a topic and it didn't make it into our pile. I'm not sure what happened. I submitted a topic relative to coroners and medical examiners, and it didn't make it into the pile. I'm not sure, maybe I didn't hit the right button at the send moment but I think that there is a worthy discussion here about the coroner system generally. I think our coroners do pretty good work, but across the country, there have been cases where coroners got it wrong, not having the medical expertise to thoroughly investigate some of these cases. And there's also a financial question about, contracting for autopsies to be done out of state or someplace. And so I think if we look at this topic about requirement to report a death and bring coroners in, maybe we could shoehorn in a little more of a discussion about death investigation generally.
Thank you.
Please, thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
I'm
Chair.
going green and red, red and green. Red, go ahead.
Along these lines, just briefly, I mean, Senator Case just mentioned it, in a way. My position on it is we have inquest statutes still on the books that are from a very long time ago. I think they're antiquated and I think they're fraught with due process issues. And we almost brought it up in this committee, like the first time I was sitting, and then we all voted it down. I remember Senator Nethercott being very irritated with us. But anyway, we kind of a bunch of new freshmen didn't know what we were doing. But so we were about to do that lift, and then we didn't. So this is one we haven't heard, and I think there's some really interesting stuff and some things that need done.
Thank you, Representative. It says a couple hours. It could develop into more than that. But I think it's very relevant. A lot of these laws, I think, go back 100 years. So I think you might want to star that one and consider it for your list. Let's keep moving, committee. A little bit of urgency. We're at 20 after. Representative Harrelson, take it away on the topic of promoting obscenity educational exception amendments.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. So here on page 13, this was actually Representative John Bear was the one that was bringing this as something that's pretty near and dear in his community. And I think I'll open it up to him to speak. But one of the things I just want to say is this conversation of this exemption, I do believe needs to be discussed. We don't want to take and we don't want to put handcuffs on our educators where they can't do their job, but that isn't the case. That's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about instead is just where we've seen some pretty sad and pretty nasty things coming down the pike, and in reality, I think it's almost unfair in a way that we're even making them make these decisions. I mean, if it's a deal where, hey, this can't even come in, this is a no fly zone, I think we need to make that statement, because what we're having our children exposed to things they shouldn't be exposed to. And that's something that we have to protect, is our children from this stuff. So I think with that, I'll turn it over to the good representative from Coal Country.
Thank you, Representative Harrelson. Appreciate it. Good morning, Representative.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Please give us your perspective on this proposed interim topic.
So first of all, I believe that this is an issue that Wyoming needs to be working on, and I do believe that the body will bring a common sense approach to this issue. It's a national issue. It's likely to end up in the Supreme Court sometime in the near future, and I do believe that Wyoming should be getting on board as far as determining exactly how we want to conduct business here, our policy. There are several different approaches that different states have taken as far as how we determine what is appropriate for appropriate ages and still maintain our First Amendment rights to have all kinds of different materials in our libraries, both public and school libraries. So one of the bills that was brought by Representative Knapp from my community, and he had a novel approach, and it really was about maintaining local control and taking our statutes and ensuring that when we use the definition of what is the community standard, if you will, that we would rely on those elected officials from that community. And so we basically put it into statute with that bill, if we had passed it, to look at the community, and therefore each community could look at their libraries differently as far as what they want to have in those libraries. And it would be based on what that community finds valuable or what they think is prurient interest and things like that. So obviously there is a gamut of opinions about what is appropriate for each age, and So I thought that was a novel approach. Some states define exactly what is obscene in their statutes, and we have done that to some extent, but it's very broad. And when it comes to this particular issue of where we're denying obscene materials and holding people accountable, I think this approach of letting local elected officials determine what is appropriate and what is not is a good measure, because and different communities can have different things in their libraries. And the bill also addresses the issue of enforcement and in particular eliminating teachers and librarians from an exemption, which I think everybody here can agree that it's important that we have these exemptions for law enforcement and prosecutors. They have to have these materials in their possession. But now we're talking about disseminating, and each of us and these particular persons that would be librarians and educators would also be subject to prosecution for disseminating these materials if they were outside of their job. So if a community determines that something is objectionable and yet someone in one of these positions continues to provide those to people that community agrees is not appropriate for that age group, then there should be some mechanism to ensure that stops. And so that's what the bill does as well.
Okay, Representative Bear, thank you. I appreciate you honing in on House Bill 283, I think it was. Committee, any questions of the representative? I think this was discussed very widely over on the other side, and appreciate you coming this morning, Representative. Thank you. Let's keep moving. I want to get to Representative Provenza on juvenile justice data collection. Go ahead, Representative.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think the department has a lot to say. This was something that we talked about, so I'd invite them to come up if they would like to. But essentially, we talked about juvenile justice data collection in 2021 interim quite a bit. And that was where we talked about juvenile justice data, or juvenile justice as a broad term. We ended up on doing data collection was our only thing, because it's hard to kind of move forward with that. The department has talked to me about potentially having some updates on that, just because it was such kind of a novel new thing. So that there's that topic. We were also looking at some child support, which we had in a bill this session, but I'll let Ms. Schilling speak to us on the first one.
Good morning. If you
morning.
could please state your name for those streaming in and everybody in the room, it would be really appreciated. Thanks.
Absolutely. Thank you, Chairman. Members of the committee, my name is Lindsay Schilling, and I'm the Social Services Division Administrator for the Department of Family Services. And I'll try and be brief on this one. So it was a huge 2021 interim topic that resulted in House Bill 37 in 2022, directed the department to stand up a statewide juvenile justice data collection system, and had some language in the bill around identification, de-identification, confidentiality of that data over the long term. So we're in a really unique and I think timely situation right now, where we also have work underway with community juvenile service boards on the juvenile justice diversion side. We're also building a new case management system at DFS. So this topic really looks at ensuring that when we stand up that data collection system, we're meeting the legislative intent of being able to do some of that cross-system longitudinal analyses. And the permissions for all three data sets are a little bit different, and we would struggle to do that with some of that language the way that it is now. So we just want to be sure we're successful in standing up that system and meeting the intent.
Ms. Schilling, thank you very much. Questions, committee? Anything? I would invite you to stay put. We've got a next topic for consideration, which, unless you have anything else, Representative? Oh, I'm sorry, Representative Oakley, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I've got a question. Rather than studying it as an interim topic, because we have spent a lot of time on this, if you say can you do proposed legislation so we can make sure we have the statutory authority? And then if so, is it something we need to study as an interim topic, if you will?
Go ahead, Ms. Schilling.
Chairman, that's something we'd be happy to look at too. We've created a kind of an internal matrix on sort of what we can and can't share for those three data sets, and
it's really just aligning the three if that's how you would like the data analysis to work.
Committee, it sure seems reasonable that we might want to look at this. A lot of work went into this in 21. And anyway, go ahead, Representative Provenza.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I was just going to say I'd like to get it right. I know we just did a ton of work, and so I certainly am happy and willing to bring individual legislation to try and tie that end up. But I think having the mind of this body specifically to kind of work out what exactly is the intent and needs of the legislature, so we can get it done and not have to worry about maybe getting data that we can't use or that we're missing things and so forth.
I'm inviting anyone else who wants to come up. Don't be afraid to come up and sit beside Ms. Schilling. Ms. Schilling, I was going to ask you, next up for our consideration is child support foster care referrals. Do you have comments on that? Your colleagues maybe do? Somebody?
Chairman, I do. I can provide some background on that too. It really is continuing conversation on what was House Bill 245 from this session. It made it out of House Labor and then didn't go anywhere after that. But generally, it's a policy conversation on the pros and cons of assigning or making child support mandatory or assigning child support in foster care cases when we have families that are working toward reunification, typically low-income families, what the benefit is or isn't of making child support mandatory. So that's really the big policy conversation of that bill.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to have to rely on my House counterparts to catch me up on that one a little bit. Either one of you ladies like to testify on this one or up for the next one? Please weigh in if you have something.
Mr. Chairman, Christy Gordy, Senior Administrator of the Economic Security Division with Department of Family Services. So my division oversees child support. I don't have anything in addition to what Ms. Schilling said, just that we'd be working together with regards to the foster care referral and child support topic.
Okay, thank you, Christy. Appreciate it. Anything, committee? Okay, let's keep moving. We're at 9:30. Not a whole lot of time left this morning. Proposed interim topic. The next one up, examine prevalence of juveniles charged in municipal courts and consequences. That comes from the Wyoming Children's Law Center. Ms. Sheen, thank you very much for being here. I'm just glancing down through lots of information here. Take it away. Catch us up on this one.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I'm Donna Sheen, the director of the Wyoming Children's Law Center and also representing the Wyoming Youth Justice Coalition. And this topic that I brought actually dovetails nicely with the prior one on juvenile justice data collection, because really what we're talking about is coming at the problem from two different angles. I think what you'll find if you take on the data collection is that the issue is whether or not we can get information from municipal courts and store it and how we do that. My proposal is to also look at it from the other perspective of whether we want to just simply narrow what municipal courts are allowed to do with juvenile offenders. And I think that conversation needs to be had with our Wyoming prosecutors. So I would suggest that it could be a broader topic where we just take a look at what communities are doing in terms of what court they do use. We know that some communities rely heavily on their municipal court to process all juveniles. And if we don't fix the data system, we won't even know about those juveniles. Or if we look at it from the other angle, could we help those communities to use the court systems where we have built the data so that we can gather that information and do a better job of using our data system to really help us with outcome analysis, which is what we want most of all, is to be able to measure whether or not our juvenile courts and our juvenile procedures are actually helping children or doing the opposite. And I would be happy to answer any further questions. I would also say on the child support, those are all kind of mixed questions. So we certainly support looking at that bill again to remove the mandate for child support as well.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Sheen. Appreciate you being here. Any questions, committee? We're going to urgently keep moving this morning. Representative Rodriguez-Williams, you have a couple next up. We want to take those two for us and
Sure, thank you, Mr. Chairman. This originally was an individually sponsored bill that I carried, and just wanted to bring it to the committee's attention to see if it was something the committee was interested in sponsoring. We, as you all know, we had a big briefing from DCI as to the relevant prevalence of fentanyl. There were a few bills that Representative Oakley brought that helped clean up state statute to integrate fentanyl into criminal statute. And this bill essentially creates a grant-funded program through the AG's office to adequately fund law enforcement grants so that we can get our canines up to speed with their training so that they can detect fentanyl. My goal in this is just to propose the idea that we're approaching the issue from all angles. We know it's up and coming and it's going to get worse. And so I just want to make sure that law enforcement has all the tools that they need for this.
okay, thanks for bringing that. Anything, committee? Okay, how about that next one, Representative?
Thank you again, Mr. Chairman. So this is a constituent concern that was brought to me. She's not here today, so I'll just present it on her behalf. But basically, it's to look at our parental abduction, statutes. We currently don't have a parental abduction. The situation that was brought about to me is that when a custodial parent does not return a child, there's an emergency hearing that's requested, which of course takes a lot of time, a lot of money in attorney's fees, and at times can result in educational neglect. And our statutes specifically deal with age 7 and up when it comes to educational neglect. And so this in turn would just be something to look at and possibly consider.
Appreciate that, Representative Rodriguez-Williams. Anything? Okay, committee, let's keep going. We're at 9:35. Representative Washut, you've got a couple up next. Please take it away.
I do. I think the Attorney General's office will tell us a little bit more about this first one that I agreed to sponsor for them.
Thank you, Chairman. Kara Chambers, Attorney General's Office. You're going to see me a lot, sorry. I actually think that this could dovetail nicely with Representative Rodriguez-Williams, a broader look at, controlled substances and how DCI handles it. I don't have much more other than what the Attorney General provided, but I would add, we don't think this would be a very time-consuming. We would probably hear testimony from, again, an attorney in the criminal division and someone from DCI lab. And so I think it could be combined with some of the other topics when you want to look broadly.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Co-Chairman.
Just quickly, just what we're dealing with here, the different forms and way the drugs are packaged and produced and transported, and our statutes really haven't kept up with some of those present practices.
Apologize. There we go. Go ahead, Representative.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So very briefly, again, just whether we need to actually study it. It says that what has become apparent, the controlled substances don't fit well into one of the categories listed in the statute. Can't you just give us the language? I mean, what am I missing? It seems like this isn't.
Yeah.
Chairman Lynn, Representative Oakley. To be fair, executive branch offices will usually propose an interim because we wouldn't be seen lobbying an individual legislator. So we bring these as topics for you guys. If you think this would be more, I believe we could have the language for you and this would be a very easy lift. But we tend to do these through, when we make requests of things that we want to look at, we tend to do it this manner by bringing it to our home committee, which you are for the Attorney General's office.
Okay, thank you very much. Anything else on that one? Western Interstate Corrections, Mr. Co-Chairman?
Director Shannon's here to tell us
And I see that good director coming forward. It's good to see you, Director. Western Interstate Corrections Compact. Director, tell us about that.
Mr. Chairman, Co-Chairman, committee members, my name is Dan Shannon, Director for the Wyoming Department of Corrections. Very briefly, in 1959, the Department of Corrections got into the Western Compact, and that includes our Western states that if we want to transfer an inmate
that we're permitted to do so. Our probation and parole, which is the other half of our department, is in the interstate compact. Most, I think, I believe all our states within the Western Compact already belong to the interstate compact. Mr. Chairman, it's really about efficiency. It really breaks down that if we choose not to, and the example is if we have an individual who's ill that our department cannot provide a service for, and we can exchange with, say, Missouri, it takes at least 6 months to go through the Attorney General's office, have contracts written, things of that nature. So it doesn't prohibit us from doing it. This is based solely on efficiency that I believe is an antiquated possibility. If we choose to do nothing, we'll continue on the same path we're going. I'm just trying to streamline it to make it much more efficient.
Okay, questions? Okay.
Go to prison and see the world?
Yeah, so thank you, Director. We appreciate that. Good topic for our consideration. The next one, Wyoming Public Records Act. Director, take us away on that one.
Mr. Chairman, committee members, this is very simplistic. Not only is this about efficiency, this is about public safety. When an investigation is performed within our agency, it's from a number of sources. I'm just asking for consideration for a very specific exemption. This exemption, I believe, for whatever reason, was just looked over in the past. Our Department of Corrections is one of the most transparent agencies, I believe. We're asking for our investigative unit, which are peace officers, that conduct investigations to have the same right. If a crime was committed inside of a county jail, it's exempted. If it's an investigation by our auditor, it's exempted. So we take that information, we place it to law enforcement and our county prosecutors. And because of the small size of our department, we're often asking for protection orders. We redact most of it for the safety of our inmates. And those who we're unable to do, we have to ship out of state. So once again, I just want to reiterate, this only would involve peace officers from our internal investigation. I would also like to state at the conclusion of all our investigations that we're performing at this time, we do provide a summary report that talks about what allegations, if they were substantiated or not, as well as what corrective action was taken.
Director, thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Anything, committee? Okay, really appreciate you being here, Director. Thank you. The Attorney General's office on this next one is back up for child sexual abuse material.
Chairman, again, fairly self-explanatory. This was brought to us by the Internet Crimes Against Children Commander, Chris McDonald, to the Human Trafficking Task Force. This is something that would be a simple strike and replace to one statute. The 4 times child pornography is mentioned to insert child sexual abuse material, which is just quite simply the term that is used in the field. We feel it's more appropriate. A lot of us don't like the term child pornography just because it feels wrong. But more importantly, it's just a more accurate description. This is would be a very simple lift, quite frankly.
Okay, Mr. Co-Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just briefly, just a comment. Of all the things that relate to internet crimes against children in our state, updating the language is the most important aspect of that the AG's office wanted to bring to us.
Chairman, that was not my statement, but this seemed like something that was achievable, a nice win for our state. Obviously, they're dealing with this, but this is just something that they would like to see. They just thought it was something worth addressing.
But aren't there more pressing issues or other issues of importance here that we're not completely addressing? Anyway, this seemed odd that the language change was the topic brought forward. I digress.
You're fine. I'm sure they would let you know that having more funding for more agents would be the top priority.
Sure. Well, thank you very much. Appreciate that. Committee, again, we've got to keep going. We're almost at a quarter till. I don't want to miss these, but we're going to run short of time as we keep going here. Security justices, we've already brought that up this morning. Wyoming's unsolved murders. Representative Washa, do you want to catch us up on that one real quick?
The committee heard testimony, Mr. Chairman, earlier about the NIBR's compliance rate. We're about maybe 50% of our agencies using the NIBR system. And what that means is that homicides that occur in a jurisdiction that is not NIBRS compliant are not being submitted to the FBI. And this is becoming an issue nationwide where our homicide statistics are simply not accurate. There's a group known as the Murder Accountability Project that's been doing a lot of really interesting research. And I think it's important for us, maybe as a committee, to look at how many unsolved homicides do we have out there in Wyoming. There is a provision where these unsolved crimes can be turned over to DCI for investigations. A good friend of mine, Ron Francel, wrote this great book, Alice and Gerald, about cold case murder investigation here in Wyoming. And a couple of things stood out. One of those things was that the DCI cold case investigators who are working these unsolved homicides often do so on a catch-as-catch-can basis. Anyway, it just seemed to me that this might be a very interesting look at how these cold cases are investigated, the forensic side of it, the logistic side of it. I just think it'd be, compared to some of the other topics on this list, maybe a little more interesting.
Anything, committee, let's keep marching. Next one up, Mr. Co-Chairman, you're on that one too, Medical Examiner's Office for Wyoming.
Yeah, I already mentioned that in terms of the reporting of deaths. I do think that this was a request from our county coroner in my county to at least consider the model that's being used in Montana and determine whether or not it was financially viable in our own state.
Okay, thank you very much. Senator Case, you're next up on residential rental property.
Mr. Chairman, I wasn't sure whether this was going to show up here or in perhaps corporations, but this comes from Representative Provenza's neck of the woods. It's from a landlord very concerned about overregulation by the city of residential properties. The question is, what is the role of local in terms of regulating private property? So I wasn't really expecting to see it on this list, but I'm fine with it being looked at wherever. I do think there's an overreach that's happening with respect to private property. And
it, yeah, that's another one that kind of crosses over into the corporations world, it seems to me. But Representative Provenza.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Being from the community that this is targeting, I will say it will take far more than 3 hours.
Thank you, Representative. Appreciate that. Yeah, certainly worthy, but it looks like it could be time consuming. Okay, the next one, committee behavioral health issues encountered by the judiciary. We've touched on that already. I believe Ms. Butler did. I think it goes without saying that we've got to make sure that our judiciary branch has the safety issues in place that it needs. Staffing for the administrative office of the courts. Ms. Butler, you want to come up and quickly run us through that? We're running so short of time, and I apologize for that. Lots of things to cover this morning.
Mr. Chairman, Elisa Butler, Court Administration, State Court Administrator for the Wyoming Judicial Branch. I will be as brief as possible. So my office consists of a team of about 35 people. And what we do is we provide supportive services for all of the judicial branch in Wyoming. So that includes circuit and district courts and all of the employees they're under. So we provide a number of services similar to what the executive branch does in a number of different agencies. So HR support, budget support, IT support, any kind of fiscal support, all of those fall under our purview in the administrative office. What we have found in looking at other states is that our staffing is well below what other states who are similarly situated have. So for it, and I think it's in the write-up here, 35, and I believe one of the states has about 50 or 60 that are comparable. If we want to provide the services that are needed for the judiciary in Wyoming, we basically need more resources. So that's what this topic is, Mr. Chairman. We have also submitted this topic to appropriations for consideration in the interim.
Okay, Ms. Butler, thank you. Appreciate anything, committee? All righty, let's move on to sex offenses. We already touched on that, committee, unless there's any questions or concerns there. Another proposed interim topic is veterans' legal assistance. This is program related, and I'm going to just hurry through this one, Mr. Winnie. We're going to keep moving. This is something I think we have an opportunity to learn more about. I think we can hopefully even squeeze that one in there. It's of good interest, I think, to the committee. Parental rights, we kind of touched on that one. And I actually didn't realize that Senator Beitman had put this in here, but remember we talked about that. Review of the use of prescription digital therapeutics. Is Mr. Schultz? There he is. He's right back there. Let's get to this one real quickly, Mr. Schultz. This one I thought was worthy of bringing forward to at least learn a little bit about. So go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, Shane Schultz on behalf of Pear Therapeutics. It's a prescription digital therapy that they provide. There are other companies that are out there, but I know that they'd like a chance to present to the committee. I think it dovetails nicely with some of the conversations around substance abuse. It's an app-based therapy for the simplest way to look at it. But I think the thing to understand for those who may discount the idea of using an app-based therapy is that, one, it's not a pill. And two, there's an accountability nature to it because the provider is able to see whether or not the individual is using it. The bulk of the use of the therapy actually is after hours when your support system usually is unavailable. And they've had some good success with the South Carolina Department of Corrections. There's a neighboring state where they're working on a potential pilot. We've had some very early conversations with Director Shannon. And I just think if you'd like to get an update on it, I really don't think it would take more than an hour, if maybe two. So happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Schultz, thank you very much. The corrections piece, it might be that we can include this piece in there. It's intriguing. Any questions, committee, anything? Okay, thank you, Shane. Appreciate it very much. Ms. Dunk, do you want to come forward, please? Bias-motivated crime, non-discrimination.
Thank you,
Couple of
Mr.
interesting
Chairman.
topics. Go ahead.
They're different issues, but similar. So I know you've discussed these in the past, but I just want to pose the one question to you when you're thinking about it is our state model is the equality state. My question is, are we? So both of these won't take any time. If anything, I can give you some proposed legislation. There is some federal funds out there for some training. I'd like to concentrate a little bit more on the helping our law enforcement and those others with training on these issues so that when they identify them and they go to prosecute and such, they actually have those skills. So that the funding is available, and it's an economic development issue as well. There's a lot of businesses that we've turned away in our state because we didn't have these things on our books. That's it.
And that references really both those topics, committee, well written up. I think commend you to go ahead, Representative Oakley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I sound like a broken record, but we took voluminous testimony in regards to this in 2021. It's available if anybody wants to watch it, but this absolutely creates, it's emotional, it's a lot, and it takes a lot of time. And we did it, and we stopped short of it. I would suggest if somebody wants to bring this bill, and we also heard from a lot of economic development that it's brought that way, but that we spent a lot of time on this not 2 years ago.
Thank you, Representative. Ms. Duncan? Oh, Mr. Co-Chairman.
No, I'll wait.
I was just going to say thank you for being here to the former representative. Anything else? Go ahead, Mr. Co-Chairman.
There was one more that I submitted, and again, I don't know whether it was user error on the website. It was on behalf of the city of Casper. They raised the issue of our task force officers who serve on our DCI task force operations. As you might know, we have several different task forces around the state. They are staffed by DCI agents and coupled with local deputy sheriffs and police officers. The funding for those positions has come from a number of sources, including state funds, and has not kept pace with the rising salaries of these officers. And what this creates is a situation where sheriffs and chiefs really have to struggle to, do you put an officer on the task force and take somebody away from uniform patrol or detective work when you're not being reimbursed. When they were being reimbursed more fully for the cost of the officer's presence on the task force, it made it easier for them to spare people to do that. When the reimbursement levels have diminished over time, it makes it more challenging for those chiefs and sheriffs to justify putting officers on those task forces. And so I just think it'd be a fairly short look, but to take a look at how these task forces operate and where the funding comes from. And I think it'd be a worthy short study for us.
Okay, committee. Please put task force officers and DCI on there on your list of considerations. And any quick thoughts, Mr. Odekoven?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Byron Odekoven, the Executive Director of the Wyoming Association of Sheriffs and Chiefs of Police, rising in support of the topic. And I think it would be good for the committee to kind of understand criminal enforcement in Wyoming from the task force perspective of the interplay between the state, DCI, the Attorney General's office, county attorneys, and local agencies on enforcement of a host of topics and criminal activities that go on in Wyoming. And it is disheartening with the budget cuts that the legislature's gone through, along with a seemingly pass back, if you will, to local agencies, more of a financial burden, the impact it's had on crime. And that may be a very interesting topic to kind of look at the consequences of earlier actions in light of what's going on today. Mr. Chairman, it could be very interesting.
Thank you, Mr. Odekoven. Really appreciate it. Committee, we're 5 minutes out from gaveling in. Appreciate all your attention and time. Please take some time to get some prioritization thoughts back to your chairman. We're going to try to have that done by Thursday morning. So please get that back to us and appreciate it. Thank you.